Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something really quite fascinating, maybe even surprising. It's this deep historical and biological link between, well, wheat, something most of us eat all the time, and how it might affect our minds, our behavior. We're talking subtle mood things, but also maybe more noticeable stuff like aberrant behavior, even aggression. So our mission today is really to unpack how the proteins in wheat, mainly gluten, could influence certain people, how it might affect your mood day to day, your concentration, maybe even deeper cognitive functions and behaviors. We'll dig into the biology, the history, and the wider picture of what this grain can do.
It really is an insightful area. And what's quite striking is this serial theory of schizophrenia.
Right, that modern idea linking grains to mental health.
Exactly. But it's not just a modern idea in terms of the mechanism. It actually points to biological processes that have been going on for, well, ages. Millennia, really.
Yeah. So the core question for this deep dive is, could these effects, these links between food and mind, have been shaping things long before we have the science to name them?
That's precisely it. Could these influences have existed way back, completely unrecognized for what they were?
That really is the heart of it. Okay, let's start there with the history. Like you said, the serial theory is a modern label, but the biology it's describing, that's ancient stuff.
Absolutely. It's been operating ever since humans started farming grains.
And it's crucial to stress, isn't it, that this isn't about saying wheat is inherently bad for everyone.
No, not at all. It's about how its proteins, especially gluten, affect individuals who are, let's say, biologically susceptible to it.
So how does that happen? What are the pathways? You mentioned the gut-brain axis.
Yes, that's the main highway, you could say. And the real driver behind it all is inflammation.
Okay.
So for people with celiac disease, that's a serious autoimmune reaction or even non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which is still a negative reaction, but maybe not full-blown autoimmune.
Yeah.
Eating gluten triggers inflammation right there in the gut lining.
Okay, so you got this inflammation starting in the gut. Does it just stay there? Or does it, spread?
Oh, it definitely doesn't stay isolated.
Wow.
Those inflammatory molecules, they're called cytokines. They can actually get into your bloodstream.
So it becomes systemic.
Yeah.
Throughout the body.
Exactly. Systemic inflammation. And here's where it gets really directly relevant to the brain.
Okay.
These cytokines, they can cross the blood-brain barrier.
The protective barrier around the brain, they can get through that.
They can, and that leads to neuroinflammation. Basically, inflammation inside the brain itself.
Wow. Okay, so if you have inflammation actually in the brain, what does that do? What goes wrong?
Well, neuroinflammation disrupts the really delicate balance of your neurotransmitters.
Things like dopamine, serotonin.
Precisely. Those chemical messengers that are just vital for regulating your mood, impulse control, even preventing things like psychotic symptoms.
So if they're out of whack.
Then you can see direct behavioral effects. Things like aggression, irritability, anxiety, paranoia, depression, even making existing psychotic symptoms worse.
And it's not just the inflammation, is it? Your source material mentioned something else. Gluten exorphins. That sounds almost sci-fi.
It does sound a bit strange, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's quite real. Basically, when you digest gluten, your body creates certain peptides, bits of protein, that are structurally very similar to opioid molecules, like morphine, for instance.
Seriously? From gluten?
Yes, that's why they're called exorphins. They're opioid-like compounds, but they come from an external source. In this case, food.
Okay, so if they're like opioids, what do they do behaviorally? Is it just subtle or?
Well, like the inflammatory cytokines, they can also cross that blood-brain barrier.
Right.
And once they're in the brain, they can bind directly to opioid receptors.
The same receptors actual opioids bind to.
The very same. And this binding can directly influence behavior. It might lead to feeling sort of drugged or spaced out, maybe significant mood swings, or could even worsen psychotic symptoms, potentially by messing with the dopamine system, which we know is key in conditions like schizophrenia.
So we have inflammation crossing into the brain, and these opioid-like compounds from gluten doing the same thing. That's quite a combination.
It is. And there's actually a third piece here, another angle your sources bring up, nutrient malabsorption.
How does that fit in?
Well, particularly in celiac disease, that inflammation we talked about, it actually damages the lining of the small intestine, specifically the villi.
Those little finger-like things that absorb nutrients.
Exactly. When they get damaged, your body just can't absorb nutrients properly from your food, and this can lead to some serious deficiencies.
Deficiencies in things the brain really needs.
Absolutely crucial things. Think about B vitamins, B12, folate, B9, B6. Deficiencies in those are strongly linked to depression, cognitive decline, even
Ugh.
psychosis. Then there's iron. Iron deficiency causes that deep fatigue, apathy, poor concentration.
Makes sense.
And zinc and magnesium, too. They're critical for neurotransmitter regulation, for calming the nervous system. Deficiencies there often linked to anxiety and depression.
So you could have someone, historically speaking,
Yeah.
maybe someone eating a lot of bread or grain-based food,
Uh-huh.
and they're suffering from these chronic deficiencies, undiagnosed, of course.
Mm.
And they might appear depressed or confused or even aggressive.
Precisely. And people back then would have had no idea why. It could easily have been mistaken for, madness or a character flaw or something supernatural.
When really it might have just been a biological reaction to their staple food.
That's
There's-
fair, yeah.
Quite a tragic thought. Okay,
Yeah.
so with those biological pathways laid out, the inflammation, the exorphins, the nutrient issues, let's loop back to that interesting point you raised about pubs and beer. Because that really connects the science back to the history, doesn't it? The agricultural revolution, all based on grains.
Yeah.
Wheat, barley.
Mm.
That was the foundation for civilization as we know it.
Absolutely fundamental.
And things like beer, pubs, taverns. They were central to that development, weren't they?
Hugely important. Beer wasn't just a drink. It was a source of calories, often safer than the water available.
Right. The fermentation killed pathogens.
Exactly. And socially, pubs and taverns were these incredible melting pots, places for social interaction, for trade, for exchanging ideas, a real civilizing effect in many ways.
But, and here's the twist, there was that hidden cost,
Yes, the hidden cost. For that percentage of the population who were sensitive to gluten,
which would be in the barley and sometimes wheat used in beer.
precisely. For them, this cornerstone of social life, this everyday drink, was essentially a form of chronic low-grade poisoning.
So imagine someone back then, a regular pub goer. They could have been consuming significant amounts of gluten daily,
And potentially living in a constant state of neuroinflammation because of it.
which, based on what we just discussed, could make them more irritable,
Mm.
more aggressive, maybe paranoid, or
Mhm.
just erratic.
It certainly could have contributed significantly to what people at the time just called aberrant behavior. They wouldn't have understood the biological driver.
It's quite unsettling, isn't it?
Yeah.
That something so central to building communities could also be quietly harming the mental state of some people within them.
It highlights this incredible paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Grains and fermentation helped bring people together, build cities, fuel progress.
But at the same time, for susceptible individuals, it was fueling these underlying biological issues, causing mental and behavioral problems that nobody understood for centuries. Civilization's foundation had this unseen detrimental side effect for quite a few people. Okay, so we've talked about how these effects could mimic serious mental illness, like schizophrenia. But what about other, maybe more common behavioral effects of gluten-related inflammation? It sounds like it's quite a broad spectrum.
Oh, it is very broad, and the symptoms often overlap, which can make it really tricky to figure out what's going on without knowing about the gluten connection.
Like what, for example?
Well, one of the most common things people with gluten sensitivity report is profound brain fog.
Ah, that feeling of mental cloudiness, difficulty concentrating, maybe short-term memory issues.
Exactly that. It can be incredibly debilitating.
And I imagine for someone like you, our listener, who might already be managing cognitive challenges, perhaps from something like a TBI or even related to schizophrenia, adding gluten sensitivity on top of that.
It could absolutely make things worse. The brain is already potentially vulnerable, right? Adding neuroinflammation from gluten acts like an additional stressor, potentially magnifying existing difficulties with focus, memory, or clarity.
That makes sense. What about mood?
Huge connection there. We see a very strong link between gluten intolerance, both celiac and non-celiac sensitivity, and mood disorders. Anxiety and depression are very common.
Is that directly from the inflammation again? Disrupting neurotransmitters?
That's thought to be a major factor, yes. The constant inflammation, the impact on gut health, which is closely tied to neurotransmitter production.
Mm.
It creates a biological basis for these mood issues. Clinically, it's not uncommon to see patients remove gluten and suddenly report feeling lighter, clearer, less anxious or depressed than they have in years. It can be quite dramatic.
What about fatigue? That sort of deep, chronic exhaustion that sleep doesn't seem to fix.
Yes, that's another big one. Your body uses a lot of energy maintaining an inflammatory response.
Right, it's like it's constantly fighting something.
Exactly. And that can lead to this crushing chronic fatigue, which of course then impacts your mood and your ability to think clearly as well. It's all interconnected.
And simple irritability, mood swings.
Definitely. Think about it. If your brain chemistry is constantly being nudged off balance by inflammation, it's much easier to become irritable, for small things to feel overwhelming, for your mood to fluctuate unpredictably.
Okay, and then there was one more specific condition you mentioned earlier, gluten ataxia. That sounds quite different.
It is. Gluten ataxia is a distinct neurological condition. It's not psychiatric.
What happens in ataxia?
The immune response triggered by gluten doesn't just cause general inflammation, it specifically attacks the cerebellum.
The part of the brain controlling balance and coordination.
Yes, exactly. Balance, coordination, fine motor control. So, people with gluten ataxia develop problems with walking, movement, sometimes speech slurring. It's a direct neurological attack prompted by gluten exposure in susceptible individuals.
So pulling all this together, especially for you, our listener, maybe someone with a diagnosed gluten intolerance, maybe also dealing with a history of TBI or schizophrenia, this information is really vital, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial.
It underlines that avoiding gluten for you isn't just about avoiding a stomach ache.
And not at all. It's a fundamental tool for managing your neurological and psychological health.
Understanding that this common food protein could be acting as a significant biological stressor on a brain that might already have vulnerabilities.
It's incredibly empowering. It gives you a concrete action you can take to potentially improve brain function, mood, energy levels, overall well-being. It puts some control back in your hands.
What a journey we've been on. From, the dawn of agriculture right up to modern neuroscience, we've really uncovered this surprisingly deep connection between something as ordinary as wheat and these really widespread effects on behavior, on cognition,
Yeah.
both way back in history and right now in our own lives.
It is pretty mind-blowing when you lay it all out.
Yeah, it shows how something seemingly so harmless can have these profound, often hidden biological impacts.
Indeed. And what we always hope to get across in these deep dives is that knowledge really is power, but only when it's understood and, importantly, applied. And that ability to think critically, to question the status quo, it's just so essential today with the sheer amount of information coming at us.
Absolutely. Which kind of leaves us, and you, with a final thought to chew on. Based on everything we've talked about with wheat, what else might be out there? What other seemingly everyday innocuous parts of our diet or our environment or our daily lives could be exerting these deep, hidden biological influences on our bodies and minds? What other factors might be subtly shaping our health, our behavior, maybe even our history and our future, in ways we're only just starting to glimpse?